At this time of year, it can feel like there are a lot of opinions on goals. At least that's the case in my world. Should we be setting January goals at all? Should we be doing resolutions? Are they not just destined to fail? Which type of goal is better or worse? Lots of opinions flying around. And yet, having now worked with thousands of people on their goals, the one thing I do know is that there is no one size fits all. It's going to really vary according to your context, your personality type, what's worked for you in the past, your preferences. So for some people at this time of year, it's going to be those really big, hairy, audacious goals that are motivating. Perhaps they've had some reflective time ahead of January. And so this is the time that they want to release those goals into the world and set them into motion. For others, it's about taking some smart habits and systems. And for others, this is not even a time to be setting goals at all. And all of these are equally valid. I'm going to be talking actually about the goal-free approach next week. But ultimately, there's a lot of variation here. And so for me, it's not about saying which approach is better or worse. I'm not going to stand up here and say, I only set this type of goal at this time of year. I want to encourage whatever feels appropriate for you. And of course, this is what I do in my work as a coach. But today I want to highlight the 3 key types of goal that come my way and that I see repeatedly arising around this time. I want you to get an awareness of their features, and it will help you figure out which types of goal you're actually setting so that you can set those up for success. Because over the years, I've seen the pitfalls and mistakes that go along with each type of goal. And I've also seen what can make them more easeful, more joyful, and ultimately feel more effortless. What I want for you this year is that this time next year, you can look back and go, wow, that didn't feel hard. It didn't feel like a struggle, and yet a lot has unfolded. And the other reason I want to make it feel more effortless is that right now, today, we might be full of motivation, but in a few weeks' time, Blue Monday might hit, and we may just want to surrender into the wintering experience that is January. And it's perfectly possible to do that and create wonderful things this year. Whether you do have a lot of goals that you want to achieve, or you just want to make some tiny tweaks or really appreciate what is already in your life. So I want to help you set all of that up for success. So let's dive in. This is the Executive Coach Podcast with me, Maya Goodka, where I help you tune in to work and lives that feel spacious, successful, and aligned with who you truly are. Having worked with hundreds of leaders, I know that when we're properly supported and with great prioritization and planning, we really can have it all with ease. So let's stop the overwork and dive in. So the first category of goals is the outcome goals. I feel like these are those traditional goals, the ones that they're very extrinsic, quite visible, measurable. Perhaps when we were younger, it's about achieving a specific grade in an exam or getting into a particular university. Could have been about winning a game that you're playing a sport in, or winning a competition, getting a particular race time. Perhaps it's about buying that house, that dream house, or finding the dream partner. It could be about getting that promotion, salary increase, getting that dream job. It could be about getting your target income levels. So these things, they're all pretty measurable, they're pretty visible, and we can see these in the world without necessarily knowing what's going on beneath the surface. We don't know at what cost these were achieved. Did they come at the cost of some burnout or at the expense of relationships, for example? It is the stuff that will have one element that is within our control, yes, but another element that is not within our control. You can call it luck, you can call it chance, but it may just be a confluence of other factors that we ourselves are not able to control, and especially we are not able to marshal them within specific timeframes. I am not against these kind of goals, and people will come to me with these kind of goals. And in particular, I want to make sure that these are aligned with our bigger vision, because what's unhelpful is to set these types of outcome goals and then achieve them and then realize that we still feel exactly the same and that life-changing experience has not come to pass. And so to me, it's incredibly important that if you're choosing some outcome goals to manifest, that they are really aligned. And of course, that's what we do on my Vision Builder program. We take the time to craft that vision, but then we unwind it back to the day-to-day and we think about what some of those outcomes would be that are super aligned with that vision. So some of the common mistakes that I see with outcome goals. Outcome goals, because they're not within our control, they can lead to frustration and disappointment. One of the things I see is trying to put a smart sticker on outcome goals. And that means trying to put the label of specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and crucially time-bound on an outcome goal that we don't have full control over. This is basically, to me, the kiss of death to an outcome goal. When we try to control the timings on something that we don't actually have control over, we are stifling that goal. We are stifling its opportunity for the universe to manifest that for us and do it according to its own timings. What I really recommend, if you have some big outcomes goals that you want to make happen in your life, first of all, putting a time frame on those is going to be tricky. So perhaps let go of the idea that may come to fruition in 2025. It absolutely may, but depending on the size of it, the level of transformation, it may not, and that's okay. Being okay with that is one of the first steps. The second bit, and I know that I might lose some of you here because I know that we have different degrees within my listeners of interest in manifestation. But for me, outcomes goals are the perfect candidate for manifestation work. I have a few resources that are my go-to on manifestation. This is a good opportunity for me to let you know that those manifesting resources and the steps that I'm about to go through, I have put those into a clear, followable framework in my first ever Substack newsletter, which I am linking to in the show notes for this episode. And so they will have the specific steps. So don't worry, as you're listening now to what I'm going to talk through and you're thinking you haven't necessarily captured all of the steps, all of that is laid out in a simple way in that newsletter. But coming back to this, so one of the resources that I have used heavily is a book called Cosmic Ordering, but it's quite amazing because I have put in so many cosmic orders, and I was dusting off that book recently and it still never ceases to amaze me when I have put these orders in, how they have eventually come to pass on no particular time frame. At the time, they always feel pretty impossible or like a mountain that needs to be climbed. But when I look back on them, they have always come to fruition. Probably a lot more slowly than I might have expected or wanted, and that if I had assumed entire control for it, that I would have liked. But that's me keeping this really real here. I am a believer in manifestation, but I believe it happens quite slowly. And given that I am trying to talk us through the most easeful way through outcomes-based goals, to me it really does boil down to giving up some of that control of the goal, surrendering it to the universe, engaging in the meditation, the journaling to really get clarity on what that stuff is. And then the biggest thing when it comes to outcome goals, which I've probably learnt the slow, long, hard way, is that they typically only come about when we've let go of the goal, when we've let go of attachment to the goal. And I know this is controversial because there's some of you sitting there going, well, I think I've manifested something and I was highly attached and I was really activating those positive emotions. So I don't think you can ever say 100% of the time. My experience has been the quicker I have let go attachment to the goal, the more quickly that manifestation has arrived. I had one example where I was really keen to become an affiliate faculty member at London Business School, and especially as I was employed there. But as I left and started my new life independently, a couple of years passed and I remember thinking to myself, gosh, it's amazing how much of a dream and aspiration that was for me. And now that just doesn't feel so important for me. And within 2 weeks, they had sent an email inviting us to apply for affiliate faculty roles. I give a few more examples of when this has happened for me in this newsletter as well, linked in the show notes. So that's the first category. That is those outcome focused goals. Common mistakes here are putting a time frame on it, making that time frame too short, approaching it with masculine energy, i.e. one where we can control all of the steps and focusing on just execution and over assuming accountability for the goal. The approach that feels more easeful, more joyful, is about perhaps surrendering that goal to the universe, letting it go, appreciating what's within our control, what's not within our control. We can then take what is within our control and put it into projects and processes, which I'm about to talk about, but then allowing the universe to do its work for those goals and freeing ourselves of that pressure and tension to make it happen. So that's the first one. Quite important, I think, at this time of year, because I am receiving a lot of inquiries, and often it is the outcomes goals that people are focusing on or thinking about at this time of year. So the next category is projects. And just to give some clear definitions here, by project, I mean anything that has a number of steps. So it's not just a single item. It might involve others. It might involve multiple steps. And therefore, it is not something that you can have on your to-do list one day and expect it to be completed within that day. And I'd like to call these fun projects, because this is an opportunity to be really playful and put in projects that we think are going to add to the richness of life, adventure, creativity, allow us to express ourselves. If these projects can excite us, the idea of making these things happen is going to be really exciting and enriching. Again, we need to be very careful about how we select them, because part of being able to undertake a series of projects is about having the time and space to do them. And so what we don't want is to be embarking on the wrong stuff. And this can take a bit of time. So we may have a whole long list of things that we would love to do, but we want to be super judicious in how we prioritize those, so that we are doing the most impactful stuff and we are putting our time and prioritizing our time such that we can have the best leverage on our time. So when it comes to projects, I encourage you to think about projects that are aligned with your longer term vision, that feel like they really fit with that, because it can be easy, and I have seen people doing this, it can be easy to think of things that we should do, that we think we should be getting done. And I want this to feel like a really delightful process and a really delightful year. So I encourage you to think about the stuff that is going to light you up when it comes to choosing your projects. Will the process be fun? Will you have great people that you can do this with? These are some of the questions. Some of the common mistakes when it comes to these type of goals. A common mistake I see is starting too many of these at one go. But when you have multiple simultaneous projects, you have admin and overhead time for each of those. And so actually you make slower progress overall by having too many simultaneous projects than you do tackling one at a time, knocking them over like dominoes. And certainly for me last year, I had a really long list of fun projects and things that I wanted to do and try, and I really had no particular expectation that I was going to get through them. But because I approached them in a slow productivity way, I really did feel that it was so much more effortless. It didn't feel hectic, and yet I smashed through quite a lot of those at a rate that was much faster than I expected. Two other great things to set up your projects for success are really getting your time management. We talk a lot here about routines and having dedicated space in your week for these projects, such that even on your busiest, laziest, worst week, you still have a system and a place for these projects to have life given to them. So that is really important. And the other thing that enables these projects to become super fun is by having great team. Now that could be having a group of other people who are working towards similar things so that you're just sharing and exchanging ideas, or it could actually be having a team that you're working with on this, or it could be working with your partner on the specifics of the project. Whatever it is that can make it not just sit on your shoulders. Sometimes I will be working with a group of executives and they will identify a series of things that need to happen. And one of the best things that we are able to then figure out is actually, yes, we want this thing to happen, but there is a perfect team member who would love to take on the execution of that. So I would love to encourage you to think about where you can seed ideas for projects, but that perhaps you don't need to carry the entire weight of that project. And certainly having the right systems in place can make a big difference. I'm about to talk about that in the third category. But for example, this year, my system with my husband of having a shared to-do list meant that there were some things that were on my 2024 goals list that sort of just happened without me having to do anything. Some of them were major things, but some of them were small things like getting our Christmas lights set up outside. So thinking about who we can have on our team for specific projects can also make it feel so much more light, easeful, and joyful, because we're not having to carry and push and drive these things alone. The third category. Now, this category is the underpinning of the other two. And also for some people, it's the only way that they now want to set goals. Now, at a high level, this category is about having systems and routines. So to break that down a bit, systems are a series of steps or processes or elements that come together to deliver specific outcomes. So if you break down a system, then you're going to have a series of processes, for example, that are put together. Or likewise, if you're going to have a routine that is serving your higher goals, then that routine will consist of a series of smaller steps that might be smaller habits or rituals that then are assembled to create a routine. So we have high level, we have systems and routines, and broken down, this can be processes, habits, and rituals. And these are the controllable goals, right? These are the ones where we can get smart. And by smart, I mean specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And the funniest part here is that people will tell me about these goals and they will say, I want to read more. They'll say, I want to do more LinkedIn. They'll say, I want to do, and this word more is often very unspecific. It's not time-bound. And so part of then the work there is to start making it super specific, super time-bound. And in particular, we want to figure out what's going to derail this and how can we, from now, overcome that. This category is, it could be for one of your outcome goals, the bit that you can control. And it could be about developing some systems and habits that will really support that. I'll give you some examples of some purely automated systems that I set up last year. One was my Calendly, which basically was configured to give me a day off each week, just because it won't accept meetings on one day of the week. Another was automated investing, so that every month a portion of my income is going into investments. Another one was downloading all of our domestic tasks so that we knew what needed to happen on a daily basis, which made it much easier to outsource. And another one was having a regular meeting with my husband on our shared tasks and logistics, where we were then also able to seed these projects and make them happen. So you can see that some of these were pure automation. Once they're set up, they just work as they are, and others require a bit more habit and process input from me myself. And this is where systems can bleed into habits and routines as well. For this year, I don't know what I'm going to be thinking about from a systems perspective. I know that I need a solution for photo management, and I have a feeling right now that will require some habit from me, because I will need to at least be manually favoriting and then coming up with a chunk of photos, even if that is then quite automatically going into some sort of a digital album or a frame. But I think it will require some input from me. I have heard there are now apps that will clean up all your duplicates and suggest the best photos. So perhaps even that part could get more automated. But ultimately, I'm looking for what I can put into place that will be low touch from my end, but that will enable something to just run and will make sense of this photo situation that many of us I know are facing, where we have so many photos and we're not entirely sure what to do with them. So when it comes to process, there are a few things I think that can be helpful. The first is falling in love with the process itself. Is it a process that you enjoy? Is it a process that you can see yourself doing day in, day out and actually enjoying it for its own sake? My walks in nature are like that. Even if they have other benefits, they are something that I just look forward to. Creating this podcast is another example. But what are those things that you are willing to commit to that may very well take you in the direction of your vision, but are ones that you love for their own sake? That would be one test. Another one is, does the process actually give you your results? And I don't mean does it work for most people. And I have certainly been in the position where I've been told to trust the process. So I'm sure that the process might work for the majority, or it might work for the person who's writing about the process, their own experience. But if I am going to commit to a process, I need to know that it's going to work for me, my unique and specific circumstances, which are unlikely to be the majority. So I do actually want to get quite critical of the process before I commit to it. That might require some testing. It might require some iteration before I feel that is something that I can commit to. Another example is something that I do in December, which is I try out different habits that I might want to commit to in January. It sounds really nice to do a 10-minute strength workout at home every day, but in the cold, harsh reality of life, am I actually going to do that? Those are the things that I want to test before I'm going to then implement them or really go all in on them and commit to them. So I think with processes, don't necessarily assume that the first process you stumble on is going to be completely right. Maybe be quite critical of which ones you let into your life so that you're not overwhelming yourself, but also allow for a period of experimentation and testing. And just because a particular process doesn't work doesn't mean that the whole thing is not going to work. It just means that you probably want to find another way or want to tweak it. This is obviously something that I am doing all the time with my clients. We're constantly tweaking the processes so that we can get what actually works, what actually feels joyful and takes us in the right direction. So those are 3 types of goal. We have the big, hairy outcome goals. They're often the ones that are more visible, they're more measurable, but they are not always entirely within our control. I don't believe that we should discount these just because they're not within our control, but I just don't think that getting there through the kind of traditional masculine energy alone of pushing and steps and execution is enough. I think we need to call upon other energies such as manifestation and allow for these to take their course. The second one is projects, and I encourage you to think about fun projects and ones that are really aligned with your vision. And then the third one, which is really the bedrock, is those systems and processes. Some of these will be one-off things that you can set up. I'm always on the lookout for these types of systems. James Clear talks a lot about having systems for success. When I then tried to do a deep dive on what some examples were, I couldn't find many. So I hope I've given you a few here today. Calendar scheduling tools, finance ones, domestic ones. If you've got any other systems that are working pretty automated for you, please let me know, because I think this is an area that can be really interesting. These then bleed into habits and routines, and that is something that we talk about quite regularly here in the podcast. Ultimately, we want to test these and experiment with them before perhaps we commit to them. And I encourage you to be quite critical about which ones of these you let into your life. Make sure that you actually enjoy them for their own sake and that you're not blindly trusting in a process. And if that is something that you feel is a challenge for you or that is not quite hitting the mark right now, then that's exactly what I'm here for. That is what I do on the Vision Builder, getting that vision, getting that aligned with the 3-year plan, and then figuring out the steps that are right for you, given your personality, given your context, given your preferences, and being able to do some experimentation with that to really nail that, to make sure that you're focusing your efforts on the right thing. Next time, I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different, which is goal-free living. For those of you who have a bit of goal fatigue and not really into the whole January goal setting thing. And if you did find this episode helpful, I do recommend checking out the Substack. It's called Life Work Tweaks for Busy Parents and Leaders. And the idea is that as we embark on a new year with all of our hopes and dreams, we can kind of get to the middle of the year or even a few months in and sort of lose sight of some of what was important to us at this time. And so I'm hoping that that can be a weekly nudge, a space, a container which you can hop into from the start of the year and just be gently nudged with high leverage tweaks each week. I will set them out in a way where you get the idea quickly and then you see some really great examples, and I will share my personal accounts of how I'm trying to do things, as well as those simple steps that can nudge you into action and just create those tweaks, because we're often doing most of the stuff anyway, and this is about finding those areas where we can just shift things a little bit and get that marginal increase that will compound through the year, and so that we can all look back at the end of 2025 and say, gosh, wow, that was really cool. And it was just those little things along the way that held me in that space and kept me in a positive flow. As a subscriber, you'll get to see the main idea, the main tweak, and then the rest of the post, which will be about the specific framework steps to put it into practice and the way that I'm going about that. That will be then behind the paywall. And as well as that, as a paid subscriber, you'll also get access to a quarterly office hour with me. I think right now the annual price is discounted, so it's a good opportunity to get it. I think it's at a real bargain price right now, about £40 or $50 for the whole year. So like less than a coffee per month, to jump on that and have that much more of an interactive way of engaging with the stuff of this podcast. That's how I've started it. It's always a bit vulnerable when you start something new from scratch, but I've done it with the podcast. I've done it with the coaching business. So I'm optimistic and I'm interested to see where it goes. But if nothing else, if you've ever derive value from this podcast, then I would love it if you could give that at least a subscribe and perhaps share it with others if you think they might find it helpful. Okay, I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.